Hello guys, today I'm going to be doing a video on The Witcher 3, the next gen update, with the Steam Deck. We're going to be starting it off with 800p on the lowest settings. Let's jump into it. Alright, now starting it off at 800p on the lowest settings, we're getting almost 50 FPS. Not a bad start to be honest. I think we could hold 60 FPS with the previous patch 1.32 I believe. But I could be wrong there, we might have just had 50 FPS and I'm just forgetting things. But it's a good start, sitting in the low 50s, down to the mid 40s as well. Something I forgot to mention at the start of the video is that I'm using DirectX 11. With DirectX 12 the game will just crash and will give you a black screen. Now using DirectX 11 we can't use FSR 2.0 that's built into the game, but we can still use system-wide FSR that's provided to us by Steam, which isn't ideal, but it will do the job and hopefully we can get our FPS back with that. Now the game is running decently well, we're getting a couple stutters as we go through, but for the most part it is running quite smoothly I would say. Now this area here is very GPU intensive. As you can see we're pulling around 10 watts of power to the GPU and 2 to 4 watts of power to the CPU. So an area like Novigrad in the city area will be far more CPU intensive and FPS might fall down into the 40s and even the 30s. So that will be interesting to see how it performed there. Final thing I want to mention is the quality of the game. On the low settings the game does look quite decent still. We do get some pop-in unfortunately with the trees and the post on the side. You can see the torches just coming into the view. It's not too bad to be honest, the trees are far worse. They pop in out of nowhere. But for me, to be honest, it's not a deal breaker. Still a good experience in my opinion. And the game does look quite decent still, so yeah, it's not too bad. I do think the medium settings will be the sweet spot for the Steam Deck, but we'll get there once we get there. Let's go on fast travel to Novigrad, the inner city areas, and we'll see how it runs there. And here we are, Novigrad. Good start, we're getting 50 FPS. But let's get going though. And dropping down into the low 50s, not too bad to be honest. I was expecting far worse with this new update, but it's running decently well still. Lowest FPS is around 40, so a 40 FPS cap might still be doable at this point. It's kind of risky, you might fall down to the 30s in those higher, more intensive situations. It is stuttering with the uncapped frame rate, just keep that in mind, but if you cap the FPS to 30 or 40, it should be far smoother and far more stable. Now at 30 FPS, as you can see, the game is running far smoother. There's not really any stuttering. We do get some occasionally still unfortunately, but hopefully we'll get patched out in the next couple of months and it'll run perfectly smooth like it was before. Now so far low settings isn't really ideal. I think you can use it if you want to save some power and play the game portably, and at that point a 30 FPS cap is a must. But I think for most people, mix of medium settings, maybe high settings as well in there, would be the ideal way to play this game. Alright, just gonna push it up to the medium settings and see how it runs. And here we are with the medium settings. And we're getting around 40 FPS. So we lost around 10 FPS I would say in this area. We had 50 FPS beforehand, almost 60 in some areas. And we're sitting in the low 40s up to the high 40s, which is quite a decrease in FPS, but the game does look far better. It's really improved to be honest over low settings. Definitely a massive jump in terms of quality. Now although with low settings we could go with the 40 FPS cap, with medium settings we cannot. We are falling to the 30s occasionally, even in this area. It is more GPU intensive obviously, so we can use FSR and get some performance back. But overall, as it is right now at 800p, we can't get a stable 40 going. Back to Novigrad, and we're getting about the same as what we had at low settings. Okay, a few frames lower. We had 40 FPS in this area, now we're sitting at 36 to 35. And that's why I would say go with a 30 FPS cap at medium settings. And I'm saying this because with the current frame rate, the game is stuttering and lagging all over the place. Going from the mid 40s all the way down to the mid 30s. It's pretty atrocious. So yeah, just go with a 30 FPS cap and you should have a good time. Playing the game with the high settings now. Now one thing to mention is that you want to disable NVIDIA Hairworks. By default it's set to Geralt, and if you play like that you will just have no hair in game and your FPS will be far lower. So just make sure that you have it disabled and you should be good there. And here we are at the high settings, getting 27 FPS. Not the best experience so far, we're getting a lot of stuttering and the game feels very slow and laggy. But let's get going anyway. This area is very intensive with all the vegetation, all the trees, all the bushes. Super intensive on the GPU. But as we leave the area, FPS will slowly climb up hopefully into the low to mid 30s like it was before. Almost the high 30s even, wow. Now although FPS is sitting above 30, really the mid to high 30s, the game does feel very stuttery and very laggy still. And back in Novigrad, FPS is a bit higher than what we had before, since it's more CPU intensive than GPU intensive, so the high preset isn't really affecting it as much. But as you can see, FPS is still getting very close to that 30 FPS limit. It is just enough to be playable I would say. It's not the best experience, but it's not the worst either. It was definitely far worse outside. But yeah, I think at this point, this will be the final preset I will test. And I'm going to go ahead and optimize the settings and play with that instead. So for my optimized settings, I chose a mix of low and medium settings. I could have definitely pushed it a bit higher to the highest settings, but I don't want to risk it. I want to have some extra headroom there in case of a heavy situation, so we can have a stable 30 FPS experience going from here on out. And we're getting around 42 FPS, which is closer to the medium settings than the low settings, but it definitely shows the game does look far better than the low settings. And with this preset, I'm really targeting 30 FPS more than 40 FPS. So if you want to play the game at 40 FPS, I would lower the resolution down and use FSR to get your FPS back up to 40. But overall, the game does look fantastic. The game is stuttering a little bit like it was before. We are getting some popping around the trees a little bit. It's not too major, but it's still there. I can definitely spot it. Now, this is the main area we're looking for. Can we hold 40 FPS here? Oh, there we go. We had some dips into the high 30s. The game was stuttering quite badly there as well, but not too bad. We can hold 40 FPS here. We are cutting it a bit close, sitting at 42 FPS. It doesn't really leave us with much headroom there, but if you want, you can go with the 40 FPS cap after all. Alright, let's go and push it up to 1080p so we can see how it performs while in docked mode. Now, playing the game at 1080p, we are forced into the low settings. I tried with the optimized settings, but it was just too intensive. We were sitting in the mid 20s up to the high 20s, but at the low settings, we were able to hold a mostly 30 FPS experience, which is quite decent. The game is stuttering a little bit, but it's not too bad after all. Now, the quality of the game isn't the best at low. The game feels kind of empty, especially with the vegetation. Definitely more packed when you play at medium or high settings, and it looks far better as well. So at this point, you have the option of playing the game at native 1080p or lowering the resolution down to 800p or even 720p and using FSR to upscale up to 1080p. And back to Novigrad. At 1080p low settings, the game is running decently well. We are able to get 30 FPS most of the time with some dips into the high 20s. The game's not stuttering, it's actually running decently well, like I said before. And the quality is also way better in here than it is outside. It's mostly the vegetation that's giving it away. It definitely looks far worse at low settings compared to medium or high. So I'm going to go ahead and restart, use FSR, and see if we can play the game with the medium settings or the optimized settings at 1080p. Now, since we are using DirectX 11, we can't use the FSR 2.0 that's built into the game. So we're using the system-wide FSR at 720p and upscaling it up to 1080p. And this is the optimized settings. So we had it before. The game looks far better. And FPS is also doing way better as well, sitting in the mid to high 40s and even the 50s at times. Whereas before, at native 1080p, at the low settings, we're getting just about 30 FPS with some dips into the high 20s. So performance is far better, and the quality is a little bit worse. It's not as sharp, but it's close enough that it looks really good. Alright, finally, let's go ahead and test out the battery life and wrap up the video from there. Alright, and finally, for portable play, playing the game at 800x500 using FSR and upscaling it up to 800p. And with a 30 FPS cap and a TDP limit of 10 watts. And with this, we can get around 2 hours and 30 minutes of battery life, all the way down to 2 hours, depending on what you're doing and what you're looking at. It's not the best, to be honest. I've done better with the original, I believe, but it's not too bad either. 2 hours is still respectable. Yeah, the game looks good. It's running decently well as well. Hopefully they can patch the game out in the next few months and make it better and more efficient. And yeah, that's about it, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys tomorrow for The Witcher 3 with the RTX 3060 Ti. See you guys there.